Thank you very much for this morning's engagement, and I'm happy to see so many of you respond to our call for a meeting. This morning's conversation will be geared towards discussing the future of our beloved nation in the run-up to the 2024 general election. As we all know, our country, Ghana, is at a very critical juncture of its life, and the decisions that we make in the upcoming elections will have a far-reaching impact on what the future trajectory of our nation is going to be for the years to come. The importance of effective leadership cannot be overstated, especially in times of crisis and challenging times like this. In the Bible, we are reminded in the book of Proverbs, which says that when the righteous thrive, the people rejoice, and when the wicked rule, the people mourn. This verse underscores the profound impact that leadership has on the well-being of a nation and its people. Throughout the Bible, we're also presented with stories of leaders who guided their people with wisdom, with compassion, and with courage. From the leadership of Moses in leading the Israelites out of Egypt to Jesus Christ's teachings, we are constantly reminded of the qualities that make for effective and righteous leadership. My message to the good people of Ghana has been on the need to reflect on the importance of choosing leaders who embody these qualities and are committed to serving the best interests of our nation and its people. And so let us also consider how we as members of the Christian community can actively support and advocate for leadership rooted in the principles of justice, honesty, fairness, and compassion. And so in this morning's interaction, I will concentrate on some issues that will form the foundation of how the church and state are going to collaborate going forward in the future. The first is to do with education. We already know historically that the first schools in this country were established by the churches. And even till today, many of the best performing schools are schools that were founded by the churches. And they are better performing because they, in many cases, are managed under the auspices of the church. And so the state and the church are partners because we have a common objective, and that is to provide quality education to our young people and to ensure that that education is affordable. And so the church and state have the same objective, and we cannot be adversaries in this common objective. And so we have to work together. We must partner together. Many of the church schools were made public schools because the state was in the position to invest in the schools and expand the facilities. And so you find that a lot of those schools were made into public schools. We have to find a way where we take advantage of the efficiency of the church's management of schools and government's investment in those schools. And so, as part of the national dialogue that I have promised on education when we come into office, this is one of the issues we'll discuss and come to a permanent arrangement in how the church and the state collaborate in creating the outcome that we want in terms of the schools that exist. But in the interim, we are proposing in future that we increase the influence of the churches in the management of the schools. And so one of the areas we look at is to ensure that the chairman of the governing board of the school is a member of the church that established the school, and that they are representatives of the church on the governing board, and that the churches should play an important role in who the head of the school is, in selecting whoever the headmaster or whoever the head of that particular school is. But like I said, this is part of the dialogue that we need to have in order that we improve the educational outcomes that we have. Today, our educational system is facing a crisis, and we must admit it. We need to look at how we can continue to make it affordable, but ensure that we do not compromise quality in terms of the edge to make education more affordable. It is the same in the health sector. The churches are very active in terms of the establishment of health institutions. And so here again, government and the church have the same objective, and that is to provide quality health to our people. And so we cannot be adversaries, we cannot be rivals in terms of that. And so I remember when I was a president, I announced that where we have a properly functioning mission hospital, we will not put a rival hospital in the community. The money that we would spend to establish a new hospital, we can use to expand the facilities of the mission hospital so that it continues to provide service. Unfortunately, under the 111 policy, that has not happened. In many places, there are properly functioning hospitals that are managed by the churches, and yet the government has gone to put a rival government hospital, investing a lot of money to build a whole new hospital, when we could have put that money into the existing hospital managed by the churches. And so it creates a duplication of efforts. It's a duplication of application of resources. And so it's something that we need to look at. And my thinking is that we must forge a new partnership in the health system in respect of the public hospitals and the church-run hospitals. Because you find that in most cases, the hospitals run by the churches are better managed than the hospitals run by the Ghana Health Service. And so how can we involve the churches more? In some communities where if you have a public hospital, hand it over to the church and let the church manage and run the hospital. After all, it's the same outcome we are all looking for. That is better health for our people, providing them with quality health care. And so these are some of the suggestions that we're coming up with. We know that our economy is on its knees, and I'll address a few issues to do with economy and the issue of corruption. We are into our 17th IMF program. Ghana probably, I don't know if they do the scores and the rankings, but I believe Ghana will be among the top 10 countries that have had IMF programs. And I remember when I announced the last one, which was the 16th, I said that it is my hope that this will be the last time that we go crying to the IMF. Unfortunately, we're very good at mismanaging our own affairs, and so we're back where exactly we were some years back. After the IMF program was announced, it would appear that some form of stability came into the economy, because then people realized that, look, this economy is going to be managed under supervision. In the previous IMF program, we went to the IMF with just one request, and that was for policy credibility. Not that we're not capable of managing our own affairs, not that we're not capable of paying our debts, but our partners wanted us to go to the IMF so that we have policy credibility that the promises that we have made, we will follow in terms of fiscal discipline. This is not the same this time. This time we went to the IMF for two reasons. One, because of the deficits and the state of our fiscal affairs out of kilter. And the second, because we had accumulated a debt that we couldn't pay. And so we have twin problems that we have to deal with. Unfortunately, the honeymoon has passed, and there is a lack of confidence in the management of the economy, and it's reflecting in, as somebody said, the deterioration of the foreign exchange position. And I mean, it was the theory, according to the driver's mate, that if the fundamentals are weak, the foreign exchange will show, it will expose you. And so the fundamentals definitely are weak. We've defaulted in our debt repayments. Today, as I speak, we have a moratorium on debt repayment. We are not paying any of the debts we owe. And those debts are both in cedis and in foreign exchange. And so you can imagine that in a situation where we have a moratorium on debt repayment, the CD is still deteriorating like this. And so if we had to commence repaying, then it means the situation is going to be worse. And as one of the stakeholders in the competition for power, we are watching all these indicators because we are most likely, by the grace of God and the votes of the Ghanaian people, likely to inherit whatever the current situation is if God grants us His favor and we come into office. And so it is our concern what is going on. We're playing our part as the minority to ensure that it doesn't get worse before we have the opportunity to come in. Inflation is still above 20%, is still among the highest in the country. Our debt has moved from 120 billion that it was at the end of 2016 to 610 billion today. And these are debts that we have deferred. Not that they are cancelled. We have a moratorium now, but from 2025, 2026, the debt repayments will kick in. And so we're not out of the woods. We face a very difficult situation. And the next government that comes would have a lot to do in order to turn our economic fortunes around. And sometimes my close family asks me and says, are you crazy? What is this problem you've gone to put on your head? But I believe that I've done it because I have the belief in my party and the people that I work with that we have the kind of people who can turn the fortunes of this nation around and put us back on track to be what our forebears expected us to be. Today, as I speak, Cote d'Ivoire is overtaking us as the second largest economy in West Africa. Nigeria is first, Ghana was second, Cote d'Ivoire was third. Today, Cote d'Ivoire is second, we are third. And we need to turn that around as soon as possible. We have a lot of bottlenecks that we need to deal with. And I'll just talk about a few things that we have in our minds that we can work with. Currently, we have an administration that has run out of ideas on how to resolve the issues that we face. And so we have to think outside the box and see how we can salvage the situation. For the sake of our people and our country's future, we cannot allow the status quo to continue, and therefore change must come. There must be an end to this decline and the restoration of stability to our economy so that Ghana's citizens and the hardworking people can breathe a sigh of relief and have their already inadequate incomes not eroded by inflationary pressures. The church has a dual responsibility, both in terms of the spiritual needs of its congregation, but also in ensuring the material well-being of your congregation. And so the church has a role to play in terms of making sure that the economy is well run so that our citizens and our congregations can have a better life. It is our intention that we will deliver realistic policies that will impact our economy and our country positively, and that the government that I will lead will deliver the much needed change that we are all aspiring for. And the flagship of this change is my suggestion of a 24-hour economy. This, I believe, will be a game changer for the Ghanaian economy. It will benefit businesses, employment, and help the youth in terms of employment opportunities. We will encourage in all sectors, manufacturing, agribusiness, digital startups, and all the other sectors, that investors in those sectors run a shift system that allows more people to be employed, but also allows them to increase their production not only for the Ghanaian market, but under the African Continental Free Trade Area for export into other markets. The protocols have been signed, the opportunities are there, So far, my information is that 77 products have been registered under the African Continental Free Trade Area that allows us to export into any African country tariff-free. We must increase those number of products that we supply, from aluminum coils to electric cables. There are so many things that if we increase production, we can become a major supplier for the whole of Africa. And all the companies and manufacturers and others that would be in these sectors will be absorbed into the 24-hour system so that they increase their shifts and employ more people so that we can export from outside. We will help them with tax incentives, give them a lower corporate income tax rate, give them incentives, exemptions, from taxes, tax holidays, and so on and so forth. And like I said, also help them in terms of their production costs by giving them time of use tariffs so that the extra shifts that they lay on in the night when we are all not using that power can be available to them at a cheaper rate than they would normally get it. So the 24-hour economy will be a cross-cutting economic policy that will impact all sectors of our lives, both public and private. The obligations that the government too has in terms of making sure that government services are available to the private sector. For instance, there's no reason why you can't clear your goods on Saturday and Sundays at our ports. The port is operational, ships are coming in, they are being offloaded, but customs doesn't work, the banks don't work. And so you can't go and make payment. And yet, that weekend is calculated in your demurrage. And so if your ship lands on Friday, if your goods are offloaded on Friday, it starts counting the demurrage. And it includes the Saturday and Sunday that they were not working through no fault of yours. And as soon as the time comes, they say from this date, you're paying, $500 or how much they charge as the demurrage. And so it's something that we must look at. There are no reasons why you can't do business with government just because it is night time. Recently, I noticed the judiciary have put on another shift. And so they've even taken the lead in terms of reducing the backlog of cases that we have. We'll repair the damage done to our economy and create a brighter future for all Ghanaians. But in this, we need the collaboration of the church. I know that the church has done well in terms of investments in education and health, but I haven't seen anywhere in the Bible that says the church cannot invest in the economy, in business, in agriculture, in pharmaceuticals, in digital startups, in services. As our tithes and our collections dwindle, it must be something that we look at to increase the sources of revenue to the church to continue to do the work that God has commanded us to do. And so our intention is to involve the church in investments in the economy and business creation. Because one of the major gunpowder kegs, a ticking time bomb that we face, is youth unemployment. In 2016, 8.5% of the unemployment rate in Ghana was 8.5%. Today, that rate is 14.7% and growing. It means that many of the young people in our congregations have a dwindling hope of being able to find a job. And the last statistic is even more serious because it says that your likelihood of finding a job is worse the higher you climb the educational ladder. So the unemployment rate amongst people with a tertiary degree is higher than the unemployment rate amongst those with secondary and pre-secondary education. And so it's become lopsided completely. And that is why I call that we must get the churches to join the private sector and government in investing in business. We must create businesses and create jobs in the economy so that our young people can have opportunity. And because the church is faith-based and has a strong moral suasion, you are probably even going to be better at running businesses than government is. State-owned enterprises are performing very poorly, and yet the church would be better able to manage that business than the state can manage it. I've stated this already. I remember I visited the Ahmadiyya movement. They invited me to their annual meeting. And they have purchased the Pomadze Poultry Farm. And so I was asking the head of the church, when I use church, I use it interchangeably. So I was asking him, I said, oh, you bought this farm. What are you doing with the poultry aspect of it? He says, oh, we want to develop it, but we don't have the resources to develop it. And I said, but this is something the state can assist you. So while you've built your prayer grounds and everything on the property, you have the poultry place where you can invest and provide poultry for this country so that we cut down on imports and then also bring revenue into your organization. And he says, oh, we're prepared to do that if government will assist us. I'm just giving that as an example. And so there are many areas where we can invest in banking and insurance, in pharmaceuticals, manufacturing, garments and textiles, in the service sector, but especially in agriculture and agribusiness. In agriculture and agribusiness, we've seen examples where churches have been involved in agriculture. I know what is the Kantanka guy's father's name? Christian Asafo. You know, in times when we're growing up, I don't know what the situation is now, but they had so many farms and they produce a lot of food. I know that the Savior Church in Eastern region has cocoa farms and things like that. And so, in terms of not only agriculture, but agribusiness, we, as one of the pillars of our manifesto going forward into 2025 and beyond, is to set up special agro-processing zones in every region where government will acquire the land, we will build the roads, we will bring electricity and water. And so any business that wants to set up an agro-processing business just has to come build its factory and start working so that you don't have land litigation issues with chiefs and families and so on and so forth. And so the churches can take advantage of it. Cassava processing, there's a huge market for cassava starch. You know, in China and in other places, those who make biscuits, they use composite flour. So they mix the cassava flour with wheat flour in order to give the biscuits the texture they want. They can't get enough. There's one of our MPs who resigned from Parliament, set up a cassava processing plant in Kintampo. He says, look, they need 40 tons, and I can produce only 10 tons. And so I can meet the market. Livestock rearing. You know, rearing in a scientific way, you know, cattle, small ruminants, goats, sheep, to provide meat for the market. We import virtually more than 90% of the meat we eat in this country is imported. And so we can do import substitution. The church can do it. And commercial crops like cotton, soya, maize, these are all things that we can support the church to do. Tree plantations, cocoa, oil palm, cashew, shea plantations. These are all things that the church can get involved with. And I believe that government must support the churches to be able to do that, give you tax and holidays, you know, provide credits at a cheaper rate. I mean, what kind of business can you invest in with the current interest rates at 30% and 32%? But if there are, you know, there's credit at a cheaper rate, I'm sure that the churches can take advantage of that. One of the issues that affects all of us is the issue of corruption. Corruption has become normal, and people who are engaged in corruption seems to have the support and protection of the people in authority. And so as a result of that, the impact that many cases of financial malfeasance, stealing, cost inflation, sole source contracts, and projects that are funded but never completed are becoming more the norm than the exemption. Recently, the MPs raised the issue of the Pualugu multipurpose dam, which was supposed to be an almost $1 billion investment. The contract was awarded, $12 million was paid to the contractor for absolutely no work done. There are many cases that I could cite, SML, there are so many of them, but I guess if I wanted to go through all of them, we will not leave here today. I make a firm promise to you, my Christian fathers, that the administration that I will lead will set a new standard in the fight against corruption. We will fight the canker of corruption and defeat it. We'll retrieve stolen monies. We'll retrieve stolen monies and hold people in government accountable. But we're not going to pursue just regime accountability. The norm has been that it is only the past government that you hold accountable for any acts of corruption. But we will ensure that those in our government who are also indulged in corruption will be held accountable. And so we will not go witch hunting just the past, we won't go witch hunting the past government. If people have been involved in malfeasance, they must be held to account. And if people in our administration also follow the same path, they must also be held to account. It is only that way we'll be able to get a handle on the canker of corruption. Today, we're suffering, and I did a tweet recently, because Electricity Company of Ghana is making more than 30% commercial and technical losses. And so they're not able to collect enough money to pay the independent power producers for the power that is generated. And one of the reasons why Professor Mills entered into a new compact, and I had the privilege when I took over as president of signing the compact with the US, was that we'll make our energy sector the most efficient, both to provide electricity for Ghana, but also to export into the West African power pool. Today, the West African power pool is up and running, but we've landed again in a situation of, let me use the word, doomsday. And that is just because of a mismanagement of the sector. We have enough generating assets. Indeed, I was accused of putting too much generation in. Those assets are there. The major problem we are facing is that government does not have enough fuel to run those assets. Currently, gas is supplying about 80% of the fuel we need, but we need to buy another 20% to be able to produce enough power for the people, and government simply does not have the money to do that. And so one of the purposes of the compact we signed under the MCC with the United States was to privatize the downstream distribution of electricity. And so metering and bill collection was no longer going to be the business of ECG. It was going to be the business of PDS, if you remember the PDS thing. And so we had accepted privatization of the downstream sector, and then we left office. So the privatization fell into the hands of our people. And it said that Ghanaians should have 51% of the shares, and the foreign strategic partner should have 49%. Then the quarrel started over the 51%. And the people who were put as frontmen to hold the shares in trust for the politicians behind refused to relinquish the share that they were supposed to hold for the politicians. And so the quarrel started over PDS shares, and eventually the United States pulled out $190 million that was meant, for that privatization, provision of metering, training of people in that sector. All that money is gone back. And recently, an announcement was made that that money was lost forever. I had met the US ambassador sometime earlier, and I said that after 2025, we'll come and hold their leg and beg them to bring the 190 million back so that we can do the privatization. But recently I hear that they say it's done. So these are things that have hurt the country. You might not think that corruption affects you, but this is an example. We're all sleeping in darkness because PDS did not work. And PDS didn't work because of corruption. And so these are examples that we need to look at. And finally, I'll look at election 2024. We are preparing for the election, and we believe that as moral voices of society, you must not take your eyes off the ball. The EC is the arbiter, the EC is the umpire, and the EC must not only be neutral, it must be seen to be neutral and non-partisan. Unfortunately, recent events do not give us confidence about this. There is a president who is appointing politically, exposed people into positions of trust where they are supposed to be neutral and non-partisan. And so people who have been communicators for the party, people who have been IT backstops for the party, today are commissioners of the Electoral Commission. How do you expect them to be neutral and fair in what is happening? People who were patrons of TESCON on campus are today commissioners of the Electoral Commission. How do we expect them to be neutral and fair in what is coming up? And so it means that we must be vigilant, we must be more alert. We as political parties are going to use the instruments that are provided in the Electoral Code to ensure that the election is free and fair. We're going to train our party agents. We're going to incentivize them to be vigilant on the day. We're going to make sure that we are at the collation centers on time and we witness the tally of the results. We're going to police the election every step of the way. But sometimes there are things that are difficult to control. For instance, our last complaint was about recruitment of returning officers. You heard Hobson Adoye on radio say that they took MPP executives from Kumau and brought them to a Jusu by-election as returning officers. And there are pictures of some of them who are executives. And we are not able to check it because the CI says that 14 days before an election, before the by-election, we were supposed to have the list of returning officers and be able to make an objection if we believe that somebody is a politically exposed person. We went to a Jusu by-election without the list of returning officers. And so it was possible for them to recruit people who were party activists as returning officers. And so those are some of the difficulties that we face. In the last election, after we all had gone to the printing presses, we had witnessed the printing of the ballots, we had signed off on it, we had packed all the ballots. What was going to every region, we had signed as a party, our party agents had signed, and then the trucks came, dispatched the ballots. Only for our agent in one of the printing presses couldn't find his laptop bag. And the last time he remembers was seeing the bag was when he was the agent at the printing press. He went back and they had printed millions of fresh ballot papers. I says, but we finished printing the ballot papers. What are these ones for? The knee-jerk reaction was, in case of a by-election, a runoff, we will use the ballot papers. But forgetting that the 10 people who were standing were still on that ballot. Runoff is between 2. Second round is between 2 people. And yet these were ballot papers of all the people who were running in the 2020 election. And so EC said, okay, let's go and burn the ballot papers. But we don't know how many of those ballot papers had been taken away already. And during the election, we arrested people holding those ballot papers, handed them to the police. Till today, nobody has been prosecuted for that. So there are things that we can do as a party, but the EC must be fair and neutral and let the will of the people speak. And that is where the influence and the persuasion that you carry as Christian fathers and the moral voice of the nation is important. That when these things are happening, often they think that NDC were crybabies. NDC some mujaya, some dodo. You make too much noise. But we want to wake up the conscience of the nation that the right thing must be done so that the outcome can be actually the will of the people. And so going up to the election, we'll continue to play our parts. We'll raise the red flag anytime we think things are not going very well. And we believe that the church community should also keep an eye and be vigilant in terms of making sure that the right thing is done. And so I have spoken a lot, and in conclusion, I believe that we must all work together to ensure a free, fair, and transparent election on December 7th, 2024. And that we must work together post-2024 in terms of turning the fortunes of our country around with regards to the economy, with regards to education, healthcare, and all that. And that we should work together to ensure that we create a meaningful and prosperous existence for our congregations and our citizens. I thank you very much. God bless you.